everybody.
Hi.
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 All right, it looks like everyone is logging in. I'll just give it another minute just to make sure everyone has an opportunity to get their video on and sound settings going.
Okay. Video. Oh, okay. Oh.
Done. All right, how is everyone doing this week?
Great.
Doing good. Good.
Great, we've got some new faces online. It's wonderful to meet you. I'm Harmony.
Hi, Harmony. Finally.
Hello. Yeah, if you weren't on last week, would you mind just kind of introducing yourself? Just, let us know your name and maybe where you are in the world.
Okay, is it from me?
Yeah.
My name is Chiyuki Yanase. I'm in Tokyo now.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm from Tokyo, actually. So it's 8:30 in the morning.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And it's probably, aren't you also a day ahead? Is it tomorrow?
Yes, it is tomorrow. Tuesday. It's like a time for you guys.
You're tuning in from the future.
Sorry?
You're tuning in from the future.
I am. It's kind of, yeah, awesome.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
Yeah, I've been practicing yoga for more than 10 years, but I'd like to start teaching yoga for children.
Yeah.
I've been teaching English to children and also at the universities at the moment, but I often visit to elementary schools in Tokyo for my research and study, but I've noticed that they need to calm down.
Yes.
And the urge is so strong, and I've been talking about mindful practice and yoga with the teachers, elementary school teachers. They are really interested in, but they're so busy. So I promised them I'm gonna study, and then I'm gonna eventually introduce you guys, and I'm gonna talk with the Board of Education, I think, in my city, and I'd like to spread the word.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, that's my purpose on taking this course, and then I've been learning a lot because it's online, so I went through already once, and I was like, wow.
That's wonderful. I'm so happy, and it's nice to meet you, Chiki.
It's nice to meet you.
And then, Mary, were you on last week? I feel like maybe you look familiar.
Yes, I was on last week.
Okay, good. Yeah. Awesome. And then Kirsten, were you on last week?
I was on the phone. Yeah, I wasn't able to do the whole thing, but
that's right. So now we get to see you in person. Awesome. Is there anyone else that's logging in that wasn't on last week that wanted to just quickly introduce themselves?
I was not.
Hi, David.
Hi. Hello. My name's David. I have a yoga studio in Atlanta, Georgia. And someone came to me with the yoga ed program that's well versed in it and has taught kids yoga for years. And wanted to bring the program or elements of the program to the studio. So I just thought I'd check it out and see what it is.
That's great. Well, it's lovely to have you. Wonderful. Okay. All right. Well, we've lots to get through, everybody. So what I would love for us to do to get started is we're actually going to start with a little breathing exercise all together to just kind of land in our bodies and get ready. So if you can join me, I would love that. If not, no worries. You can always kind of watch this or try it again later at your own leisure. But we're going to practice feeling breath. So what I would like you to do, you could either have a seat or stand, whatever is more accessible. And then I want you to take your two hands and spread your fingertips wide. Good. Now you're going to connect your pinkies together and find your belly button. Wonderful. And then interlace your fingers and slide your hands over towards the side. That should be the general area of where your rib cage is. Awesome. Okay, so now we're going to take a nice deep breath in, fill up your rib cage, feel it open up, and And deep breath out, let it all flow out of your mouth. Nice. Let's try that 2 more times. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. And then one last time. Big, big breath in. And big breath out. Awesome. So that is feeling breath. You can find that in your children's guide. The biggest piece of advice I have with this, I've kind of come up with this belly button interlaced slide trick, because oftentimes, especially when working with younger children, you ask them where their ribs are and they're like, they're here, they're here, they're here. They've got lots of different alternative versions of where their rib cage is. So it just kind of helps them get a little bit more of that awareness, right? Because we're focusing on that idea of expanding and contracting the breath. Okay, awesome. So we're going to dive right in today with a little bit of the yoga ed philosophy. So if you've been following along in week 2, a lot of what was discovered was this idea of being the yoga educator, the 5 pillars of an internal practice, an external practice, as well as getting into some of the benefits of yoga, be it physical, mental, emotional, or social. And then there was also a class for you to view with 4th and 5th graders, so you could kind of see it in action. So what I'm going to do is kind of briefly go back through some of the main topics that were discussed, and then we're going to have it be very interactive. We're going to break out into some rooms where we'll get to work a little bit more closely with one another in small groups as well. But before I get, fully into it, does anyone have any general questions for me? No? Okay, no worries. Perfect. So what I am going to ask you to do, just as a reminder and as a introduction for those who are new to the online meetup, if you could all mute your microphones at this point, that would be wonderful, just to kind of eliminate background noise. And then please feel free, if you do have a question, let me know. You can interrupt me at any time or send me a chat. Okay, so if you'd like to follow along, I'm actually going to be in your teacher's guide starting on page 6. And we're talking a little bit about the yoga ed teaching philosophy. So we have these sort of 2 major ideas, which is that there's a yoga educator, and then you also are yoga educated. And it's like, what are the steps in order to make that connection from, showing up as your teacher self and actually being able to apply all of these different philosophies that we are sort of cultivating in our practice. And in order to do that, right, the first things that we need to do are to come into a sense of self-awareness, and then also start to develop tools for self-care, right? Like, what are the yoga tools to help me shift from noticing who and how I want to be into who and how I would like to be, right, at any given moment. So within this idea, this sort of like tango between who and how we're being and who and how we want to be, we have these 3 sort of staples or principles, which is be your intention, do the action, and have the outcome. So be the intention, right? So it's coming back to that idea of what is your intention as a yoga educator. Be it that you want to, specifically work with younger children, maybe upper elementary school, maybe you want to take it from a mindfulness point of view, maybe you want to focus on social emotional learning, maybe it's going to be a little bit of everything. Maybe you're now going to use this as your PE curriculum, right? So it's coming back to your intention of the work. And really reminding yourself to stay in alignment with what it was that kind of set you up on this journey to begin with. The second one is do the action, right? So this is your relatedness to your students. So it's the idea that you are kind of practicing what you preach, right? You are also doing the yoga. Like, it is part of what it is that you do for your own practice as well. So you practice the breathing exercises, you do the poses, you're familiarizing yourself as much as possible so that you can have that understanding of what your students' experiences are going to be as well. And then the last part is having the outcome. So this is really that idea of, you know, if you are that balanced, healthy human being that you want to see in your students, that connection is going to be much stronger, and they're going to be able to recognize that in you. So this all starts with self-work, right? Or our internal practice. And there's 5 pillars that we identify for the internal practice. Self-awareness, which I mentioned earlier, authenticity, curiosity, self-compassion, and also empathy. So self-awareness, right, is the state of consciously being present to your thoughts, feelings, and sensations. So it's that, you know, arriving, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, and it's being able to recognize that, wow, I'm feeling really frazzled from my really long day. And before I need to like enter into whatever it is that I'm supposed to do next, I need to take a few moments to check in with myself, maybe even take a few deep breaths, so that I can be a little bit more balanced in my body and in my mind, right? So that first connection piece of checking in. So even when we just sort of did that initial breath together, the feeling breath, like in a way, right? And you'll see this is why we always start with time in for our lesson plan. I kind of spoke to that a little bit last week. Is it's really that opportunity, like even when your students are coming in, because you don't know necessarily what they've done right before your class, to give them a moment and to give yourself a moment as the teacher, to be able to check in with yourself and notice like who and how am I being right now. Authenticity, right? So this is that idea of being truthful in your work, and being able to be honest where you are in any given moment. It's also a daily practice, right? To share our authenticity. Curiosity. So this is this idea of like, the more curious we are about our practices as teachers, that's going to help to also motivate us to continue to discover what we're able to do, how we want to work with our students, maybe generate more of that relatedness between them. And then self-compassion. I think we can all kind of connect to self-compassion, and we probably all need to practice more self-compassion. But really that's that idea of, you know, remembering that as educators, we're often always giving to those around us. And we have to make sure that we're also taking the time to give to ourselves, right? So that we're filling our own buckets as well, if you've heard that phrase before. And then the last pillar is this idea of empathy, right? Or like putting yourself in another person's shoes. So it's that difference between kind of feeling for somebody and actually trying to understand their experience. And that really also strengthens your relationship with your students, your work, and also their ability to mirror that, or to be able to learn how to empathize as well. Any questions so far? I know that was like suddenly a lot of information. And very, very brief. I promise each of these online are much more in detail, and there's a really fun activity for each of them. Okay, awesome. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to break out into small groups, and basically Zoom does it for you. So in a moment, you'll get a request to join another room. And what's going to happen is it'll split us up equally. And I'm going to give you just something to kind of discuss. I would love each of us to discuss a different one of these pillars in terms of an example, like a real life example of how this shows up in your teaching. So I'll give an example initially. So speaking of authenticity, so for me, how this showed up was I was working with a group of upper elementary students, and it was right around the time where I myself had had injured my back. And so I was not in my best, happy, feeling great in my body self. I was actually really, really upset and frustrated that I was being very limited in what I was able to do and show. And so I realized that, so that's that, sort of self-awareness piece. But then I realized that rather than sort of meet my students with this aggression towards the fact that I was feeling this way about myself and have that kind of influence the way I was being with them, it was a better choice for me to just be authentic with them. So I sat them down and I was like, I just want to let you all know that I've hurt my back, and not being able to do all of the poses is really frustrating, but I hope that you still feel that you can do the full expression of the poses as I cue you through. But just so you know kind of where I'm coming from, and if you can sense that I'm being a little bit, you know, more snippy with you, that's where that's coming from, and I can recognize that and share that with you right away. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay, awesome. Perfect. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna break into 3 rooms. And it looks like, so Chiyuki, Mary, and then one other person who's signed in. It says Pixel 2 XL, so I'm sorry, I'm not sure who that is. I don't know if you can chime in, but that's gonna be the first group.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know how to change that. I'm touching everything on my phone to change it, and I had
No
my video,
worries.
now I don't.
No
So,
worries. Let me try.
my name is Kim.
Kim. Okay, I just asked you to do a start video, so that might help.
Okay. Okay,
There we go.
Okay.
Awesome. And then you should be able to, let's see if this works if I do it. Kim. There we go. I changed it for you.
Okay.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem. So Kim, Mary, and Chiyuki, I would love for you to discuss curiosity and examples of like being curious about your work and how that might show up for you in your in what you have done, you know, regardless of who you've worked with. And then I have Akila, David, and Sharilla. If you could talk about empathy and an example of how that might have shown up, right? So that idea of putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And then Kirsten and Teresa, if you could discuss self-compassion, that would be awesome. So when has that come up for you in terms of teaching? Okay. And I'm going to kind of jump into each of the rooms really briefly to just make sure everyone is all right as we do this first round. But yeah, feel free to just kind of openly discuss. We'll take about 5 minutes, so not like a super long time, but it sneaks up on you. So make sure everyone has a chance to get their voices heard. Okay, and then we'll all come back in just a moment. So here we go. So as soon as you get the invite, you can just click that. Perfect. Kim, are you there? Hi guys, welcome back.
Hey.
Awesome. I hope that was a good experience for you. Yay. We'll just give it a moment to let everyone else kind of come back into the main room, and then we'll discuss. Chiyuki, if you wouldn't mind sharing like a little capture of some of the things you guys talked about, I would love that. But let's wait for everyone to come back. Thank you. You're all so efficient. You were here so quickly.
We're so yeah, good students.
Okay.
Go back.
Yes. Quick, click the link. I know. Sometimes you're in the middle of like a really great discussion, and then what's funny is eventually like the Zoom will just cut you straight off, and it'll be like,
It did.
Yeah, it's like I
yeah, I'm sorry about that. There's no other way for me to like gently transition us back. I try to give you the 1 minute warning, and then yeah, it's just gonna happen. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. I hope that was beneficial. I had asked Chiyuki real quickly if she could share like 1 or 2 insights from her group. And then Teresa, I would love if you could share a little bit about what you guys discussed. And then David, I would also love for you to share, one or 2 little things. So Chiyuki, would you start us off and remind us what your topic was?
Yeah, well, it was a curiosity. And well, we have all different teaching contexts, but one is a special ed, that's Kim, and then Mary works at the public library, and then I used to work at elementary schools, and then all of us think that the curiosity is necessary, essential for children to learn something. And then also we are all curious about how to bring this yoga philosophy to children's mind and then their lives. So we discussed that a little bit, things like that.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Chiyuki.
Mm-hmm.
Teresa, would you mind sharing a little bit?
I just wanted to unmute that. Sorry. Yeah, so Kirsten and I, we talked about, ours was self-compassion, and we talked about how like we need to be our own best friends in a way. It was funny when we were talking, I mentioned about how neuroplasticity takes 28 days to like form a new habit. And it was funny, Kirsten said that on her wall, it shows she has that kind of little like pep, like talk about that as well. So how sometimes we need to, sometimes like self-compassion may take a little longer because we're so used to being our inner critic. And then like how yoga has provided, I believe, from both of us, like that space between our thoughts and more accountability in choosing either to be reactive or reflective. I really like the word Kirsten used, reflective, about how we can like be in touch with this experience. And then like really talk, we both like agreed about talking to yourself as our own best friends. I hope that I'm counting this correctly, Kirsten, forgive me if I'm not. So awesome. And those are the main ideas, I believe, that we were discussing in our mini talks with our about self-compassion. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Teresa, and recapping.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just going to unmute now.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then David, would you mind sharing a little capture?
Sure. So I was with Akila and Shrila. The interesting difference between the three of us, I do not have children, and I've never taught kids yoga. I've taught a lot of adult yoga. Akila has a 5-year-old girl, and Shrila has a 6-year-old boy. So a pretty big difference between the three of us. And we really didn't talk too much about our term, which was empathy. We talked just more about what we're trying to do here. And really just, I think we have similar interests, though, just in finding how the process of yoga can positively impact children.
Wonderful. And I think, David, to a degree, like you kind of practiced, all of you sort of practiced empathy in the conversation, right? Of like trying to understand the experience of what it's like to maybe only have ever worked with adults versus having your own children, having a boy versus having a girl. I mean, all these like factors, right? Like play their role. And so, in and of itself, it was sort of like its own empathy exercise, which is really cool that turned out that way. I was on there in their room for a moment, and I know Akila also shared how, you know, trying to have that empathetic connection with her own children, maybe trying to foster that and kind of see like how that might translate as well to the kids that she will work with. And so, yeah, I mean, all like I kind of mentioned before, I mean, even from adult to adult, it really just comes back to that idea of moving beyond just feeling for someone's experience and really trying to understand what it must be like for them to live that experience. So awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for your shares. So we're going to kind of like move on now, and we're moving from internal to external, right? So again, kind of big picture, coming to the philosophy, thinking of, okay, self-awareness, who and how am I being? Who and how do I want to be? Let me do the internal work so that I can be my best educator. So this is kind of where your external practices start to arise. The first external practice is this idea of effective communication. So in your manual, one of the first images that come up is like a happy face and a sad face, right? And so you want to always be really clear in how you are communicating. So, you know, if you're showing up to a yoga class and your arms are crossed and you've got like a really upset face and your tone changes and you're like, sit down, everyone, we're going to breathe. I mean, whoa, that's not going to necessarily cultivate the kind of environment that we want, but you are very, very clearly communicating to them through your body language, through your tone of voice, right? All these elements. So we are always trying to do our best to be effective communicators, so that again, right, we're helping our students understand what it means to be an effective communicator. So big pieces of this are, you know, listening, verbally, nonverbal communication, that empathy piece, which we discussed, communicating with respect. So always kind of coming at it from that perspective. And then also clarifying, being able to, you know, sort of repeat back to your students what it is that you listen to and acknowledge, right? So it's kind of like listening, acknowledging, and clarifying before you move on. So one example of this is, and this comes from a teacher's experience. They were teaching lion's breath. So I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with lion's breath, but it's a very big, scary breath, right? Especially if it's the first time you've ever seen something like this, and all of a sudden your teacher gets in your face and they're like, ha. Might be a little bit jarring for a 3 and 4-year-old. So anyways, this little girl started crying and was very disturbed by this lion's breath. And so, you know, the teacher, kind of putting on her yoga ed hat, was thinking, okay, so first I need to make sure that they feel, you know, sort of seen and heard. So coming down on their level, like connecting with them, like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Was that scary for you? Like trying to kind of understand what their experiences was, right? Like, yeah, you know what? Lions can be a little bit scary. And I bet my face looked really scary too, because it was really big and we don't normally do that. Have you ever seen a baby lion? And then maybe then hopefully they're a little bit like, okay, baby lions are cute. Right, so you kind of start to have this discussion both with yourself and with the student, communicating what it is that, you know, you saw happened, listening to their feelings, their emotions, making sure that they feel respected and heard, and then also clarifying, you know, how you want to move forward. I understand that this made you feel this way. Could we try it this way and see if that makes you feel a little bit differently? Okay. Great. So interactivity is the second piece of our external practices. And this is huge, especially when it comes to designing and implementing your lesson plans. So thinking of interactivity is really those opportunities for your students to be just as much involved as you are, right? So making it that dynamic, having it be dynamic between you and your students versus just you, the teacher, them, the students. This, it really allows students to feel creative. It allows them to explore so much more in terms of their bodies, their thoughts, their experiences. And it also really encourages them to sort of make sense of what's happening for them. So oftentimes you're stopping and asking them reflective questions, or asking them to sort of notice things that they might be experiencing or feeling. And then also it can just be a matter of introducing themes, concepts, ideas, like within the vein of things that they're interested in, right? So now they suddenly feel like they have a voice in the content that you're delivering because, oh, you found out they love sports, so you did like a sports themed lesson plan, or you found out that some of them are performers, so then you can kind of, create something around that as well. And then flexibility. So flexibility is the third component of effective communication. And I'm going to open this up to you guys. Anyone can kind of jump in. What do you think we mean in terms of being flexible at this point?
I actually think I have a pretty good story for this. This week I did an after-school program for the kids, and it was designed for people who are 6 to 10 years old. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, 3 of the people who showed up were less than 4. So kind of had to adjust the whole, what we expected of the kids and how they could act, and just make it a little bit simpler. Yeah, exactly. That's such a great example. And that is something that, especially as you get started, I mean, like, right, some of us aren't in schools. Some of us might come in as an after-school program, or be doing it like, in different community centers like the library. So, you may not always know who you're going to get each time, and it could change. So yeah, you spend all this time crafting a lesson and you're like, woohoo, this lesson plan is so great, I'm going to do it. And then it's like within 2 minutes, it's out the door. Forget it. It's gone. But, so we have to kind of bring it back to our intention, right? Our intention is to plant the seed. And so you can scale back a lot and still come back to what was that main thing that you wanted your students to walk away with. And as long as you maintain that, like, this comes back to theme and concept, everything else is adaptable and flexible, because ultimately, right, we're not trying to meet objectives. We're trying to meet our students where they are. And we want their experiences to be our focus versus like checking the block. Does that make sense, everybody?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. I do have kind of a point on that. What do you do to, has anyone kind of faced a similar situation, and how do you keep the 9-year-old involved and also the 4-year-old,
I can definitely share in terms of the yoga ed side of things and what I've done. And then if anyone else wants to tag on, that would be wonderful. But what we recommend is always teach to your youngest student. Because when we think of like development, like childhood development, when we think of, the milestones that they're achieving, we'll get into much more of this over the next few weeks, but it's going to be a lot easier and more possible for a 9-year-old to play like a 4-year-old than for a 4-year-old to be asked to act like a 9-year-old, right? So you have to think about it in terms of the things that they've accomplished developmentally and experientially. Always plan for the youngest student. And I've found in my, because I remember one of my first programs, I had 6th graders with kindergartners. And that was quite the difference, right? But what I found was that the 6th graders then kind of started being like mentors to the younger students, and they wanted to like buddy up, and they wanted to have that like kind of companionship, which was really, really sweet and wonderful. So it gave the 6th graders a sense of heightened responsibility, but it also gave the younger kids that opportunity to like have that sort of social emotional experience as well. So they're pretty adaptable, but like I said, it's a lot easier for the older ones to kind of shift down versus the younger ones to shift up, because, likely they don't even necessarily have that development yet.
Yeah, can I add to that?
Please, yeah.
At elementary school, I used to teach English with the 6th graders and the 1st graders mingled.
Wow, yeah. So there you go.
Yeah.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah, huge difference. But it's a really, really successful if we talk about it with the sixth graders and then say, you're going to be a mentor, you're going to be a teacher for the first graders. And then they're going to be so proud of their roles, and it works really miraculously. So I think it works when you are asking the sixth graders, all the ones, like, you're going to be the little leader or show
Yeah.
that kind of respect from the teacher. And yeah, otherwise it's gonna, the younger ones is the best one.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think what you've hit on as well, Chiyuki, is that if you tell them and invite them and think of it as like, this is going to be your opportunity to sort of try this out, versus like assuming, oh, they'll just do it. Right. But kind of like really setting it up. Like, I would love it if this could be part of your responsibility in the class. So, you know, like really just taking the time to let them know of your intention and what they can potentially do. I think that makes a huge difference. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Okay, awesome. I got to move on a little bit. Please let me know if anyone has any questions, but I just want to make sure we get through everything because this time ticks away so fast. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to share my screen, and we're going to switch over to this idea of the benefits of yoga, right? I mean, we're going to be talking about this a lot as we continue on and continue through. But ideally, right, we're always kind of coming back to what are we noticing in terms of the physical benefits, the mental benefits, because this, as someone said earlier, right, this becomes like a tool, right? Like we're using these as tools, and we're equipping our students with understanding, like, if I do this breath, this can happen. If I do this pose, I'm gonna feel this way, right? So we want to understand the utility of everything so that our students can understand the utility of everything. Okay, so can you all see my screen? And it should show table pose. Okay, great. I'm dual building on two screens. So if I'm looking away, it's not that I'm not trying to look at all your beautiful faces. I'm just also looking at a different screen. Okay, so what I wanted to bring your awareness to here is this is in your children's guide. So if you haven't browsed through the children's guide yet, I highly recommend it because there are a lot of really important pieces of information here. So one is a lovely image of what it can look like. The next thing is going to be this page where all the benefits are listed. I mean, well, not all of them. Major benefits are listed. So for example, this is table pose, a physical benefit. It helps to align the spine, strengthens the quadriceps, abdominals, back, neck, and arms. A mental benefit, so this is a focusing pose. Where to look, so the gaze point. There's instruction. So if you're, maybe you're an educator and haven't done much yoga, like maybe it's the reverse, right, of your experience. This also gives you step-by-step instructions of how to cue the pose if you're unfamiliar. And then there's also creative language opportunities. And then I also wanted to bring your attention to the grade recommendations. So as you continue to move through, you will start noticing some of the poses are not appropriate for the youngest students. And that again comes back to development. So just always take a peek as you're designing things and become familiar with what the grade level recommendations are. So like I know right off the top of my head, rocking horse, which is one of the poses in here, is only recommended for upper elementary. So for grades 4 and 5. And then the other lovely thing about this is there's also modifications. So what might you notice? You might notice that there have hyperflexibility in the elbows, right? And this is due like developmentally, right? The bones and whatnot haven't all like fused together just yet, right? So there's more going on developmentally, and also joints become really vulnerable. The limbs are more susceptible to injury. So this is what you're gonna like start to notice, right? So it says CQ 3.2. So you can go up here and use this cue. Make sure that your arm creases face in towards one another and your elbows face out. right? So again, just kind of being aware and thinking of all the different possibilities that you might notice. Okay, so that kind of talks to, you know, how it comes across in your manual. I would love for, I guess I'll just kind of call on each of you, and I would love to hear like what you think is sort of more general, like what is a physical benefit, a general physical benefit of yoga? Yeah. Okay. So Teresa, can you give me what's a general physical benefit?
Oh, I guess a general physical benefit is, I guess it really helps me be more present with myself. Oh dear.
You froze there for a moment.
Hey, hi.
You were so present, you froze in the moment.
Oh, geez.
That's too funny. So you said being present.
Right, being present and like, I guess it's just feeling really comfortable with who you are, like accepting yourself. Because I know maybe, yeah, I want to strive to get to certain postures, but that's really not the case. It's more like how you feel afterwards, and just like, yeah, very much being present and like learning that those are your thoughts and just being in tune with where you are right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And Teresa, I want you to kind of think for a moment, would you, even though it feels like a very, like it's in our bodies, like in our minds, would you think of that more as a physical benefit or maybe a mental, emotional?
Oh, I think that's more of a mental, sorry about that.
Yeah. No.
Physically, you feel
but
so
here's,
much looser.
Sorry. Yes. But here's the thing, right? Is like, but when you feel that and you feel confident, it starts to show up also as physical sensations.
Yeah.
Right. So it's either or, like how you feel can affect the way your body feels physically and vice versa. How you feel in your body can also affect the way you feel emotionally. Right. So it's that dynamicness between them and finding that balance. So really there's no right or wrong way of how you answered that. That was very well done.
Thank you for clarifying. But yeah, like the Buddhist saying. Yeah.
Yes. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, awesome. And then I'm just gonna do one more. And can I ask Kirsten to share? Kirsten, what would you imagine or have you even experienced that would be maybe a social benefit of yoga?
Oh, a social benefit. Shoot, I was thinking of physical benefits.
I switched it up on you.
You did. A social benefit is just gaining confidence in your own skin, I guess. Having that like sense of self.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of like it even connects back to a little bit of what Teresa was saying, right? With like, because the social and emotional are often very intertwined. So if you've got a strong sense of self, but you are in an environment with your peers, or people maybe even who are not your, friends necessarily, but you're having these opportunities to sort of like cultivate positive relationships and make those like healthy decisions with regard to social situations, like the yoga class environment, especially like with the game and the partner work, is really setting them up to have those experiences. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, perfect. All right, moving right along. So what I want to do next, I do want to make sure that we have one more little yoga break, yoga body break, but I don't want to run out of time. So every week, as for those of you who logged on last week, you may be reminded that I'm going to assign some homework. It is completely optional, but definitely highly recommend that you do, either last week or this week's homework, because it's lesson plan based, and this really sets you up for success when it comes to the final practice teach if you decide to do that. So for this week's homework, we're actually going to be creating another lesson plan, but this time it's going to be aligned with national health and PE standards. So one of the things that makes Yoga Ed unique is that all of our curriculum is aligned with the national health and PE standards. So what that means is that all the lesson plans have basically codes that connect it back to what these standards are nationally for the United States. Of course, this is going to be different, you know, if you're in a different country, and it's also a little bit different by state as well. So you kind of want to do your own research a little bit if this is something that you are pursuing as a PE component or as like a health and wellness program. But this is just so you have that opportunity to kind of see, like, how would I put a standard to a lesson plan if I needed to in the future? Okay, so with that said, I'm gonna share my screen one more time with you guys. Give me a second. Okay, and here we go. So you're probably gonna see more of my screen this time. My pretty mermaid picture. Okay, so here's our lesson plan template. So we can kind of think back through to the different components, right? And this is downloadable for you all from week 1. And then this website, so it's shapeamerica.org. You can kind of see the URL up here. And this will also be emailed to you in the follow-up email. You'll get this URL link. So when you go onto this website, you can view the PE resources, and you can also view the health resources. Now, for working with K-12, it's going to be more PE based. It's not until you get into usually 6th grade and up that you then are introduced to the health standards. So depending on who you're working with, that might not necessarily apply. But it's kind of cool to know, like, what are the standards, because you can very often kind of weave those into what it is that you want to do. So this is here for you to spend too much time on it, but basically you can look up, you know, what are the national PE standards. There's even an opportunity, I think, on that page before where you can go by state. So you can also find where you are in the United States again, right? It's not, this isn't international, but I'm sure that there are some crossovers as well. So I wanted to share this with you all. And then what we're going to be doing, so the health standard that, the PE standard that we're going to be focusing on is going to be a kindergarten. So this is for your homework. It's going to be a kindergarten PE standard. The standard is standard 3, active lifestyle. And this is actually being taken from, I'm going to put it in the chat for you guys. This is actually being taken from a benchmark, a Hawaii benchmark, since that's where I am. And this is what we're going to kind of design our lesson plan based around. So let me just make sure that gets to everybody. And there we go. Okay, so it says describe the social and emotional benefits of participating in physical activities. And then that's just a reminder for you to use the template so we can actually populate the template. All right, so this is a big idea, right? Social emotional learning is humongous, and it could easily be something that's discussed over many, many, many lessons. So coming back to this idea of our theme and concept, right? This is where we want to start breaking it down a little bit. So remember that your theme is your organizing idea. So it's the big idea that's tying it all together. So can someone kind of shout out maybe what a potential theme, like looking at this language here, what would be a potential theme? There's lots of options. So let's think of breaking it down further. You've got social and emotional, and then you've also got physical activity. Those are like three big ideas. Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Teamwork, or like that sort of a thing.
Totally, absolutely. So teamwork, right? And then you're going to put it in the context of yoga, and teamwork sort of is housed under this idea of working together with your peers and developing that social emotional learning piece, right? So yeah, absolutely. And just so that you guys see how broad it can really be, you could even, your theme could just be social emotional learning, right? And then your concept could be, you know, how does yoga support me in teamwork, right? I love that idea with the teamwork. Or you can break it down into something like teamwork as your theme, and your concept is something more like, how does yoga teach me to be a good teammate? Right? So it's like kind of the what is the skill part or the takeaway for them with regard to that. You could also, and then you could also break it up into, you know, just the emotional part. So your theme could be emotions, and your concept could be, how does yoga help me to understand my emotions? Right? So depending on the grade level, so this is, it's a K through 2. So you'll see we at Yoga Ed break our lesson plans into pre-K and kinder go together, 1 through 3, grades 1 through 3 go together, and 4 through 5. If you have a very specific grade you're interested in and want to just do it based on that grade, feel free. But for this week's homework, let's all try and stick to this K through 2 benchmark. And you can create your own theme, your own concept. You can use one of the ones I shared if you like. And then you just go through, like go into your manual, choose a breathing exercise for your time in, think of some questions for your discussion, pick a warm up, the poses, and then the whole time, right, you're trying to come back to this idea of your theme and concept. So like if we do the teamwork thing, you know, what might we really want to focus on in our lesson plan? Yeah, Teresa.
Like partner work and perhaps, and maybe.
No, it froze again. Are you still there, Teresa?
A time. Oh no, sorry.
It's okay. There you go. I think you're back.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, my internet connection isn't so great. Partner work and perhaps emphasizing like on how your internal awareness. I don't know how to word that in the context of
For
the
kinder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe like notice how you're feeling while you're present, and like focusing on your breath or focusing on what you're doing versus what's in your head all the time. Like focusing what you have to do versus what's in your head. Like, I was thinking I have to eat this, or I see my classmate like running around right now and I want to talk to her about that.
Yeah.
Like paying attention to either like how they're breathing or like what they're feeling, what sensation they're noticing right then versus what's in their thought.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's so many, I mean, and all of that, right? Like you could further break down into all individual lessons. And what I love, so what I pulled from that, if anyone wants to kind of go in this direction is, so she focused on partner work, right? So maybe you have a few partner poses, and instead, maybe you have instead of a game, you choose to do like 3 or 4 partner poses because that's going to be one of your focus points. You still want to kind of fill all the other components, but you could be leading up to having more partner work. And then I like this idea of almost, so maybe your concept could be, how does yoga breathing help me to be a better team player or teammate? Because, and then in your discussion, you're talking about like, if I'm feeling really scattered and I see my friend and I want to do this and I want to play, but am I going to be safe with my partner? Probably not if I'm not focused. And yoga breathing can help us become focused. And it can also make sure that we take time to like recognize what kind of a partner I'm being, notice what kind of a partner my partner's being, and make sure that we're making, taking the best steps in order to do that. So you're bringing the yoga piece back with the breath, which is awesome, right? But you're still hitting that standard because you're talking about teamwork. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Really good example. Okay. I think you have plenty to go on, hopefully. Just so super fast, just as a reference, in your children's guide, you also have, I'm just going to pull it up on my iPad really quick. You also have a whole section dedicated to lesson planning if you haven't already been looking through this part. And what I want to bring your attention to is on page 5, there's this really cool yoga wheel. Hopefully you guys can see that. And that's gonna, if you're, not as familiar with yoga in general, like if you're kind of, more so starting out on the yoga side of things, this is a really great place to start in terms of how to start to put together sequences. So how do I go from A to B to C in terms of the poses? So if that's useful for you, you can go ahead and start looking through that. We are going to talk a little bit more about sequencing next week. But again, right, kind of give it a try. My biggest feedback and what tends to work for most people is if you do it in your own body and it doesn't feel right, then add something or take away something, right? So the moment you try to go from one pose to the next and it's like, ooh, that felt super awkward or that wasn't quite right, then think back, right? Because it's a flow. We want to connect the breath and the movement. So ultimately, you're really moving from one thing to the next, and you're creating a sequential order of things rather than, okay, let's stand up and do this. Let's sit down and do this. Let's stand up and do this. Let's sit down and twist, right? It's going to be like, whoa, really, really jarring. So yeah, continue thinking about that as you sequence. Okay. All right, you guys, I have to unfortunately jump onto my other call. Akila, I did get your message about the numbering. So the quickest way I can describe it is
I got the answer from what you said earlier. Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Awesome. And if it still doesn't make sense, feel free to email me.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. All right, everybody. It was so great to see you, and I hope to see you next week.
Thank you, Harmony.
Bye, everyone. Take care.